Most men look at Michael Jordan and see the finish line, the rings, the records, the GOAT. I look at Michael Jordan and see a warning, not because he failed, because he won, and then had to live with what winning did to him. That is the part people skip. That is the part that matters. I grew up the way a lot of men did. Jordan wasn't just a player, he was proof. Proof that if you wanted it badly enough, if you outworked everyone, if you refused to quit, you would win. That was the story. And for a long time, I believed it. Completely. Until I watched The Last Dance. And somewhere in the middle of it, I stopped watching a documentary about greatness and started watching a documentary about a man who built his whole identity around one thing and had no idea who he was without it. That's what made Jordan legendary. Not just talent, not just discipline. He had a need to win that most people will never understand. In games, in practice, in card games, in arguments, in anything. He had to win. Not wanted to, had to. And if you listen closely, that is not the sound of ambition. That is the sound of a need. And that's the question most men never want to ask. Where does that need come from? Jordan talked about it himself, the chip on his shoulder, getting cut from his high school team, the need to prove something. At first, to the people who doubted him, then to the people who didn't, and eventually, to nobody in particular, just the need itself. That's when it stops being motivation and starts becoming identity. Most men don't understand how dangerous that is, because we're taught to worship the chase. Get the grade, get the job, get the money, get the title, get the body, get the status. And the message is always the same. When you get there, you'll feel like yourself. But nobody tells you what happens when you actually get there. Nobody warns you that achievement can feel as disorienting as failure. That getting everything you thought you wanted can leave you feeling empty. Because if your identity is built around chasing, what happens when the chase ends? Jordan won 6 championships, and then he retired. And within months, he was gambling heavily, playing minor league baseball, looking for anything that could give him the feeling basketball gave him, the feeling of being tested, the feeling of having something to prove. That is not random. That is not just a bad phase. That is what happens when the thing that organized your entire life disappears. You don't suddenly become peaceful. You become unmoored. And I have seen smaller versions of that in men I know. The guy who grinds for years toward a promotion, gets it, and feels empty by Monday. The man who builds a company, sells it, and suddenly doesn't know what to do with his hands. The version of yourself that lives inside the goal does not automatically survive reaching it. That is what nobody tells you. You can spend 10 years becoming the man who gets the thing, and discover the thing does not tell you who you are. That is the real question Jordan forces men to confront. Most men are running towards something, a career, a number, a title, a body, a level. But the question they almost never ask is this: who am I when I get there? Not what do I do next, who am I? Because if the answer is just, I'm a man who needs the next goal, then you didn't build an identity. You built a treadmill. And the scariest part is that treadmill can look like greatness from the outside. It can look like discipline. It can look like purpose. It can look like control. But inside, it can just be fear. Fear of stopping. Fear of sitting still. Fear of finding out there's nobody there when the noise shuts off. Jordan came back. Twice. And people love to make that sound simple. He came back because he needed money. He came back because he wanted to prove something. He came back because he couldn't let go. Maybe. But I think it was deeper than that. Because without the game, He didn't know who he was. And that's the part men recognize but rarely say out loud. We all know what it feels like to build ourselves around one thing, one role, one skill, one identity, one standard. And then act like that thing is supposed to hold us together forever. But it doesn't, not by itself. Because men are taught from the beginning that the goal is the thing. Get the grade, get the job, get the money, get the title. And if you do all of that, you'll finally feel like yourself. But nobody tells you that the real work starts after the achievement. Nobody tells you that when the applause fades, you still have to live with yourself. Nobody tells you that success can be as destabilizing as failure if you never built a self outside of it. Jordan was the most driven man alive, and that drive made him untouchable. It also made him unable to sit still, unable to be present, unable to enjoy what he had without already needing the next thing. Because when the chase is all you know, the moment it ends feels like death. And that is why Jordan still matters. Not because of basketball. Because he forces men to ask the question they avoid for years. What survives when the goal is gone? What is left when the performance ends? What is still there when nobody is keeping score? That is the part that changes a man. Not winning, not losing. Being able to stand in the room after both and still know who you are. That is harder than greatness, harder than discipline, harder than becoming the GOAT. Jordan eventually found a way through it. Not cleanly, not quickly. It cost him. It cost him relationships. It cost him years. But somewhere along the way, he stopped needing the game to tell him who he was. And that is why he looks different now. Not just older, not just calmer, lighter. Like a man who finally stopped trying to become the version everyone needed him to be, and started becoming a person again. That's the warning. And that's the lesson. The greatest men do not just build the capacity to win. They build something that survives the win. A self that still exists when the arena goes quiet. A person who can stand still after the applause ends and not disappear. Because that is harder than anything Michael Jordan ever did on a basketball court. If that hit closer than you expected, subscribe. Because next week, we're looking at the psychology of a man who figured this out the hard way. A man who built an identity that didn't depend on achievement at all. And why that idea makes a lot of men more uncomfortable than failure ever could. See you next week.